In this video, I'm going to try and explain Cinema4D Lite as cleanly, clearly, and succinctly as I possibly can. I'm going to start off with a completely new After Effects file, and I'm going to name this one C4D AE, short for Cinema4D After Effects. This will be my working After Effects file, okay? That's created. To go into Cinema4D from After Effects, you got to go File, New, Maxon Cinema4D file. That's File, New, Maxon Cinema4D file. Then I click OK, and I'm going to need to create a name for it. I'm going to save this to the same place and call it C4D Maxon, so I know this is my Cinema4D file. And then I wait for Cinema4D Lite to open up. I'm going to click New, and here we are. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Save, just like that, and there we are. I'm going to hop back to After Effects, and you'll see I now have a Cinema4D file already in my project panel. So what I'm going to need to do is drag that to my new composition, and I'll have a Cineware panel all set up. I'm going to drop down my resolution as we discussed before, and then I'm going to go back to Cinema4D after I save this. So I'm going to go save. Now we're back at Cinema4D. Everything I do here now will be linked to that After Effects file. You just have to save after you're done. Let's start off with the object tools. They're right here. And just by looking at the drawings, you can see they're pretty self-evident. I'll just put a basic cube down, and there's my cube. Okay, whenever you want to add an object or a primitive, they're right here. These blue ones will automatically appear, and they won't need anything else done for them to be seen in the scene. So for them to be visible, all right? That's the blue ones right here. That's where all your primitives and shapes are. You can move them with your gimbal here along an axis by scaling with this orange dot. That's the orange dot for scaling. See the little dot right there? That's going to scale. But if I go over the arrow, that's going to move. So again, if I'm on the arrow like this, I'll move. But if I go to that little dot, that's where I'm going to scale from. Okay? Move off the arrows, scale on an axis with the little yellow dot. That's move. Over here would be scale. See, I've got more bigger, easier to manage handles with the scale right there. And then right here, if I want, I can rotate on an axis by clicking and dragging on these arcs. So there's two different rotates, and again, just go back to your move to move the object around or scale it around. That's the basics with all of your objects. Place it. You can either move it, scale it, or rotate it, and you could use the little orange handles for your scaling and the arrows for your moving. And then once you get into rotate, just go over one of your axes, these lines, and there you can see the angle changing right there. All right, that's the basics of placing an object. We'll press delete to delete that. And I just want to point out, I've got an original cube right here, and over here you see cube. This is the objects manager right here, and below here is the attributes panel. Okay, so this is your attributes manager. This is for objects. When you place an object or do something, the attributes panel will change. It's just like any Adobe program. Based upon what you've got clicked on, you'll have a whole different set of options in the attributes manager. And down here will be your timeline. Now, we've got our shape. I want to go over these render buttons real quick. This first one right here is a quick render. It just shows you what the scene's going to look like. And I'll click out of there. The middle one is the render picture. This is more or less like the render function in After Effects. And I click the exit to get out of there, the X. This third one with the little gear icon, these are your render settings. We'll get into that later, but that's where you change things like your aspect ratio and the size of your scene. All right? So when you're making a change to something, click the render to see what it's actually going to look like, because this is a very low res, low quality preview so that you can work on your building and your animating and your texturing more quickly and then just render when you want to. It's a pretty nice workflow that they've set up. I showed you how to get a quick render of your scene, how to place an object, move it, scale it, rotate it, where all your objects are going to pop up. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to add a torus. And you see right here, it's right there. Now, if I want to, I can just hover over, well actually I clicked first. You click and then you move the mouse up and down while holding down on the click, okay? That's the way of changing without having to go click, click, click. You click once and drag. And you can see the more segments something has, the more rounded it will become. So if you want something more angular, you decrease the segments, okay? There you have it. Remember, segments will help smooth things out, but it'll add geometry and make your scene more complex and take a little bit longer to render. The basic juggling you want to do, you want to have the least amount of geometry and polygons and segments, but still look the best so that you can get a nice smooth render and then move on with your day. That's what this object is selected, and that's this object selected. Okay, that's what your object manager is for. It's like a giant list of what's in your scene. Next, I'm going to show you how to add a camera. I clicked on the camera button right here. You can click and drag and choose one, but I just want a basic camera. And there's my camera in the scene. And you'll notice, like I said before, whenever you click on something in your object manager or in the scene with your selection arrow, the attributes panel will change to update what you're selected. Totally different set of options when I've got my camera selected, okay? You add the camera by clicking here, then over here you select it in your object manager and you can change your attributes of it in the attributes manager. I'm going to hit save, Command S, go back to After Effects at this point. And again, I'm still having problems with my Cinema4D viewer in After Effects, but that's fine. I'll teach as much as I can just in Cinema4D Lite. So we've got our camera and we've got all of our information right here. Next step, we're going to add a light to the scene. To add a light, click here on the light bulb. You can click and drag and choose a specific one. I'm just going to click here and add a light. Now you can start to see that it's at the zeroed out position right here where that was. And you can see it's shooting light in every direction like a light bulb. Now if I hit my render to get a better view, that's what it's going to look like. So I'm going to click out of it. I'm going to select my light right there. With my move tool selected, I can raise it and move it to wherever I want in the scene. And then hit the render button to see the change to that. And there you have it. You can move the lights around and you could also rotate them the same as an object. And you can add as many lights as you want and change the different types to get the look you want. And you'll notice as I've got my lights selected, just as you see down here, there's a whole bunch of attributes that change based upon what you're clicked on in your object manager. The easy way of moving your camera is with your move tool. If you hold down the Alt or Option key and you hold down your left mouse button. So you hold down the left mouse while holding down Alt or Option, and that will help rotate your camera. If I hold down Alt and then my middle mouse, I'll get a different type of movement. Then if I hold down Alt and then press my right mouse key, that's to move in or out. So holding down Alt or Option and then clicking, dragging with your right click will zoom in or out, dollying the camera back and forth in Z space. Holding down Alt or Option and then using your mouse wheel will be a pan from side to side or tilt up and down. Then holding down Alt or Option and clicking and dragging with the left mouse button will rotate the camera around freely in space. So that'll just rotate it, the left one. The middle one will move it from side to side, and the right mouse will zoom you in and out. That's the fast, easy way of using your camera. And if you need help, you could use these tools here. Let me delete that extra camera I just created. See right there? I'm hovering and clicking, dragging over it. I'm hovering and clicking, dragging to move it there. Same thing. You gotta hover over it, click and drag, and move around. So you could move with these or those shortcuts I showed you, hold down Alt or Option, the left mouse key, the middle mouse key, or the right mouse key. That's an easy way to position your camera in the scene. Down here is my record button to record some motion, and here's my playhead. Let's look at lighting a little more closely. We can use light to add color to the scene, and the type of color that an object is will, if we've got white objects, they're going to show highlights and reflections far more drastically than things that have tone or color to them. So right here we've got our HSV. You could click to change it however you like. Give it a little bit of a green and strengthen it this way. There you see lighten or darken. So that's how you can color your lights, or you could use specific Kelvin temperatures if you want. Intensity is how strong the light is. And then right here under type, Omni, basically cast in all directions, or you could do your traditional spotlight. Just see where it's pointing at. And then area lights. Now, I'm going to show you how to add a floor, just so that we can see some more shadow interaction. Right here is the floor. I'm going to choose floor, and the floor is an infinite plane. Okay. And just moving this right here, we'll get some richer shadow details coming up soon. So even if you don't see the floor extend in all directions, just realize if you add a floor like that, it's going to be infinite. I'm going to go back to my light, and here's shadow. This is why we're going to start seeing it next. So I'm going to turn on shadows. If I do shadow maps soft, I'm going to hit the render. Shadow maps soft are semi-accurate, and they render pretty quickly, okay? But when it really matters is I'm going to change my shadow type to area. Area shadows are more realistic. They take a little longer to render, but you see already we've got something far more professional and interesting than when we did the soft. See, like right back there, it's just too clunky. So if you've got the time, it's always better to use area for your shading, because it'll be a more realistic fall off and you get more tone. Okay, that's a quick introduction to lighting. Now, as you see right here, we've got, I'm gonna hit the render. We've got very harsh shadows without a lot of detail, and this is sort of a retro, not very modern look. A good way to fix this is with ambient illumination. If this is clicked on, it's going to help spread light everywhere. Ambient illumination, so I went to my light, I'm in my attributes panel. We'll turn on ambient illumination, and we're just going to do a small amount of it. Decrease the strength of that light a little bit. See, that's a bit too much. So I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to add another light. Let's try sunlight just for the fun of it. You see there's some color there. And I'll turn on ambient illumination, and I'll lower the intensity. And I'll hit render. And already I'm getting some interesting things happening there. Now I'm going to show you something else, because I'm not happy with these shadows still. So I'm going to click on the third render option here with the gear to get my render settings. And I'm going to click on effect right here. I'm going to choose Ambient Occlusion, and I'm going to keep the defaults. And you see right here it's clicked on, there it's off, now it's on. So I'm going to close out of here. Now I'm going to hit the render button again. And now we're getting something right here. You can see that there's a softening of the detail of the shadows and a little bit of shadow wrap. Whereas before we didn't have that. This helps add volume. Okay, and you can see much better tone going in here. So if we add more lights into our scene, and then I move this out, and then I'm going to change the strength of it. Now I'm going to hit my render and see that dramatic difference, how softened these get in the volume change. It's darker where this is receding into the background, and right here you can see the difference in the volume of the shading. I cannot stress enough. That's click here on your settings. I clicked Effect, Ambient Occlusion. We already have it loaded up, and then you just click here to turn it on and keep the default settings, and you'll have much more interesting shadows with your work. So we did the basics of adding some geometry, adding a camera, and adding some lights. I'm going to delete all of this now. I'm just selecting in my object manager, and now we're going to tackle splines and NURBs. With my spline tool selected, I'm going to go to text. To change what the text says, you do it here in the attributes panel, and you can change the font right here. And I'm going to add a camera to the scene, and I'm going to add a light to the scene. I'm going to move it out front a little bit here. Now I'm going to move my camera by holding down Alt, and I'm going to use my left mouse key, and then my middle mouse key while I'm holding down Alt, then my right mouse key, back to my first one, back to the third one, and the middle one. There we go. And this gray box right here, that's your render area. So here we go. This is pretty decent for now. Okay, I'm going to hit the render key and watch what happens. Nothing. Okay, here's why. Splines. Unlike your primitives and your objects, these are your primitives and your objects, splines are a shape or a line that needs to be extruded. This is sort of like old school After Effects. Yeah, click on the 3D enable and then choose how much you want to extrude it. To do that in Cinema4D Lite, you need to use a NURB. So to extrude out any spline, see your splines, you've got some very interesting complex shapes to play around with and some advanced pen tools. You got your basic spline, then you have to add a NURB. I'm going to show you Extrude first. Extrude is just like classic 3D. It's going to push back in Z space. To make this work, I click my text and I drag it up to this Extrude NURB. See that downward pointing arrow? That means it's parented properly. This is the parent, this is the child, parented within it. Now my text is extruded. Now you can see the 3D geometry. And now you see how the light interacts with it. Okay? I had to extrude the spline. So first I pick what type of spline I want. And then I choose the type of NURB I parent the spline to extrude it. The item hierarchy is very important when dealing with NURBs. I click on my NURB here, and then I can change the caps on it as well. The offset right here, when I click on my NURB at the top, and then in my attributes, I go to Object, the offset here is how deep the 3D extrusion will be. Okay, that's under your offset. I can then go to my caps and choose, I can do curve, and you see the edge of where the faces meet soften up to get a much more modern look rather than harsh geometries of the old days of 3D. You can change your different types of caps. I'm just going to keep it at N-gon, and I'm going to hit the render button. And there you have how to extrude type in Cinema 4D. I'm going to keep my camera and my light, and I'm going to get rid of the NURB and the spline for the text. I'm now going to teach you about sweep NURBs. And for these, the hierarchy is very important. I'm going to choose my spline circle. Then I'm going to add a helix. So I've got two shapes. Next, I'm going to go to my NURB, because remember, you have to have a NURB and then parent your splines inside that NURB, okay, in order to extrude them. I'm going to choose sweep. So here's my sweep NURB. The first thing I'm going to do is put the circle in, and then I'm going to put the helix in. Now watch what happens. I'm going to put the circle above the helix. Okay, now it's working properly. If I click on my circle and I adjust the radius of it, it's going to affect how thick the extrusion of that helix is. Alright, so now if I go to my helix, I can adjust the start and the end of it as well as the angle. You've got so much more options here in 3D than you ever had in After Effects. I'm going to hold down the left key so we can see this a little bit better, and then I'll move in a bit with my right key so you can have it get much wider as it's going along. But you notice this circle shape, if I put the helix above it again, it's not doing what I want. It's got to go my sweep, then the shape you're using to sweep along that spline, and then the shape of the spline that the overall shape takes place. And I will demonstrate that by putting in a star and getting rid of this circle, and then putting my star in there. And I'll change the radius of the star. And you see right there, it's using a star shape to create the sweep instead of that nice round circle. So if I put that shape in, you see how it changes how it sweeps along the spline. Like such. So this is the overall shape. This is how it's extruded as it's traveling along that shape. That's how sweeps work. Or I should say the information hierarchy is very important. First the NURB, then the type of 3D extrusion that's finally traveling along this shape. So I'm going to delete those by selecting it in the Object Manager and then hitting my delete key on my keyboard. Now I'm going to choose a circle for my spline and the flower, and I'm going to put the circle inside the sweep and then the flower below that. I'll choose my circle and reduce the size of it, and then just move my camera around so you can see what's going on. Again, the shape travels along the more complex geometry. So think of the shape you ultimately want to create, and then is it going to be rounded like a garden hose, or you could even do squared off so it looks like a gear. Okay, that's all the different types of changes you can have. So let's try end side, and I'll delete that circle and I'll put the end side above there and I'll reduce it. See what I mean? Now I've got these angular edges. Let me zoom in a little bit, that I would not have been able to get with that rounded circle using in the sweep. I'm going to delete all those and just keep my light in my camera. The next type of NURB I'm going to demonstrate is called a lathe NURB. So for this, it's almost like Revolve. It's almost like Revolve in Illustrator. You draw the silhouette, like the profile of something, and then it rotates it around like the shape of a soda bottle, or a light bulb, or a balloon. Things like that, things that are rounded. So I'm going to click and drag. I just do that. Or you could do a vase. I'm just doing a quick rough shape. And there's my rough shape. Very rough shape, obviously. And I'm going to get a lathe NURB. And you can see it's making like a flower pot. So if I take that spline and parent it inside the lathe, just like magic, I've got something far more interesting looking than what I just created with that horrible, ugly shape. So with my spline selected, if I go to the edge select right there, and my arrow tool, you can pick a specific spline and adjust it. And you see how it automatically updates inside your shape. So just make sure, here's your vertices, like you select a specific vertex, and then you can adjust it moving your arrows in 3D space to get the look that you want. And dial it in, just make sure you're selected on the spline then. I'll hit my render so we can see what that looks like such. And like I said, you just draw the profile and then you use a lathe NURB to extrude it. And I'm going to try and show you a quick trick. I'm going to do text one more time. Now, if you hold down Alt or Option when you click on your NURB, it will automatically parent what you've got selected to it rather than having to click and drag into that hierarchy. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option while I click on Extrude, and then you see over here it automatically parented this. So that's a little bit of a time saver for you. Just remember that little trick. Hold down Alt or Option as you select your NURB and it will automatically parent the object in your object manager to it. I'm going to delete that. Just wanted to show you that little trick. Next, I'm just going to grab my good old-fashioned spline pen and watch what's going to happen here. I'm going to click here, there, and close it off. See how I get that little circle there? Now my shape is closed off. Watch what's going to happen here. I'm going to twirl down here and I'm going to go to my spline arc tool. I'm going to click on this one that I made. I deleted that extra point, and now you can see how I've got this functionality with the spline arc tool to add in that nice Bezier curve that I didn't even have to work on. The arc did it for me. So if I've got my spline selected and I want to extrude this like it were a puzzle piece, I would hold down Alt or Option while I choose the type of extrusion I want. And there is my puzzle piece, like such. I'm going to delete that by hitting the delete key. I'm going to place a good old-fashioned cube in the scene. Holding down Alt and Option, changing my camera angle, there we go. And then I'm going to choose Array. I'll drag the cube into Array to parent it. See, there's the down arrow, or I could delete that array. I'll put my cube back in, and then I'm going to hold down Alt or Option while I click on Array, and it automatically parented it for me. Let's change our camera angle to see what's going on here. See, I've got this nice radius now, and the number of copies, and the amplitude. I can do some interesting things here with this array. It's a quick way of getting a nice geometric shape and dialing in your attributes panel. And what I just did there was a quick example of how to keyframe animate in Cinema4D Lite. I'm going to do that one more time. And you see right here, these are my keyframes. I selected it, I clicked, I deleted it, and then they're gone. So I go back up to my array. I'm going to click on, well, first move the playhead to where I want to go. Click on these radio buttons. These are sort of like your stopwatches in After Effects. You see these? You can animate it over time. You click once, then you move the playhead to whatever time you want, and then you make a value change. I'm going to click and drag on my slider. Now watch what happened. First it turned red, now it's a yellowish orange. This means there was a change, but a keyframe was not added. You click one more time on the radio button and now it's red. Remember, when you're in After Effects, if you click on the stopwatch to start animating and then you click on the stopwatch again, you lose your keyframes. It's the opposite here. You've got to click on the radio button every time you make a change. So I'm going to rewind and then hit the play button, and there's my motion. Something interesting with very little time. And that's what it looks like in the quick render space. So again, you click, well, first move your playhead to where you want to start, click on what you want to animate, move the playhead, make a value change, click the radio button again. I'm going to delete my array. I'm just showing you how you can put things in a nice little geometric layout. I'm going to add a cube again. So I accidentally clicked this button right here. This will go to your 4-screen split up. To get out of it, just click on it again. Okay, here's my cube. Right here is a list of deformers. Okay, so I've got my cube selected. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option. I'm going to choose Bend. And look what happened. It automatically parented the bend into the cube. As you can see right here, the strength is how strong the deformation is going to be. I'm going to drag my cube out of there, and I'm going to put the deformer below my cube. So it's cube, then bend. Now watch what happens. Now my cube is bending. With the deformer, it's the opposite of a NURB. You do the shape and then the deform below it, okay? Now watch what's happening. It's pulling it, you know, and if I go negative, it's going to one side, positive, it's going to another, okay? That's pretty interesting. I'm going to go to my cube here. With my cube selected, I'm going to go to the Object tab. Number of segments, X, Y, and Z. I'm going to add a few segments. Let's just try 6. Now I'm going to go to my bend, change the strength, and look what's happening. It's bending more. It's not like a sheet blowing in the wind. It's curving like a slinky. Let's increase some segments. Then go back to my bend. See, now it's bending more and getting more circular because you have more segments to bend along, okay? And I only need to add those segments on the Y because that's where it's bending. See? But you see, I'm starting to get some roughness happening again. So whenever you start seeing some roughness, increase the number of segments and the roughness will go away. So I'm going to decrease my segments. There's less geometry, less math for this to do. Get rid of my strength. Go set it to 0. And I'm going to keyframe animate this. So I can just move my playhead where I want, go to my strength, move forward a little bit. I'm going to go positive. Go forward a little bit. Oops. I broke my own rule there. You saw what I did. Move forward, gotta click the radio button again. Move forward a little bit, I'm gonna go negative this time. Click the radio button again. Move forward a little bit. Click the radio button. And as you see, we get some back and forth. Now let's rewind that, take a look. There's rewind. This is keyframe to keyframe. Fun, simple, and easy. You've got lots of deformers to play around with. Just remember, shape goes on top, deformer gets parented below it. This is the parent, that's the child. But if you're using an extrusion NURB or any other type of NURB, the NURB goes on top and then the spline is inside it. So you've got a basic idea of Cinema4D now. Here's your objects and primitives. These are your splines, which you can draw like a pen tool or add arcs to them, or use these lovely preset shape splines. And if you're using a spline, you need a NURB to extrude it, like push it straight out like the text, or get a vase or a soda bottle look with the lathe, or sweep along. Just remember to watch your parenting order. The NURB is the parent, and then the spline is the child. Something like the sweep, you need the shape that is going to be the roundness of the extrusion, and then the shape of what it's following along the path, such as the coil to look like a garden hose or a spring. And then you've got your deformers over here. It goes object first or primitive, and then the deformer inside of it. I'm going to delete this cube, and I'm just feeling curious here. I'm going to put a figure in, and then I'm going to try an explosion into that figure. Oh neat, so there it is time, and there's my figure exploding apart. So I would click, well first you move your playhead, click the radio button for what you want to animate, move forward in time, make your value change, click it again. And then I could bring it back in by moving my playhead, and then clicking the value button again. Let's rewind. So this is keyframe to keyframe. There's rewind, and let's hit play. And I'll render that to see what it looks like. See? The deformer goes inside the shape. So it's shape, then deformer. And you just play around. I mean, the possibilities are endless. I'm going to delete my figure. I'm going to add a sphere. And I'm going to add a cone. Okay, so I've got two objects in my scene. Click on my sphere first. I'm going to hit save. I went Window, Material Manager, and I'm going to click Create right here. And I'm going to choose New Material. I can click on it and name it whatever I want. Let's do something green. Okay, to edit this new material I made, double click on it and a pop-up window pops up. This is your material editor. Color is obviously the color of it. You click the color shape, the color swatch. You see it changing up here. Go click OK. And here's a little preview of what it's looking like in the scene. So color is pretty obvious. Reflection. That's going to be how it captures the reflections of the lights in the scene and spreads them around. Adds a little bit of realism and pop to it. You could dial in your look here for a tighter, more glossy look. And it's all auto updated, so you can get whatever look you want quick and easy. See that? That's the specular, how shiny or sharp the reflections and light will be on your material. Transparency, click that on. Fully transparent like glass. Semi-transparent, it's all up to you. You could even have it glow if you wanted. And if I click luminance, it will emit a light. that is almost like a light bulb. But I need it to be pretty strong to be brighter than what's in the scene. And I'm going to go back for that red color that I had earlier. Now you can see it's going to emit a red light and keep that glow around it that I had. And I'm going to click OK. Now I've got two things I can do. I could drag this onto the shape I want, like that, or I could drag it into the object manager right here. If I hold down Command while I click and drag, I duplicate that material I just made. So I can double click and name it. Obviously this first one should be called red. And this one's already called green, so I'll double click to edit it. I can change the color of it to green. And I could lose the reflection. Well, I'll keep the reflection on. I'll lose the transparency and the glow. And I'll add this over here. So now you can see through the red into this. I'm going to render the scene and see what we got. But first I'm going to add a floor. Now I'll hit the render. And there you go. You can sort of see through this. It's got this glowing radiance, plus it's creating some light from it. So luminance will allow a shape to emit some light. You could put some glow on it, transparency, whatever you want. Possibilities are pretty limitless. Just remember, click Create, New Material, and then double click and edit the material as you see fit. Just play around with your sliders and watch the preview update. I could, like I said, drag it onto here or in the shape, hit render, and there you have it. I'm going to go back in here and I want to talk about Fresnel shading. So right here where it says texture, there's a drop down with this little triangle. Right here, Fresnel. Fresnel's right there too. Turn off the Fresnel intensity. I'll just keep that on for now. So there's my Fresnel. And I clicked on this box. And you can click these arrows to get back and forth inside your material editor. I'm going to hit render. And what Fresnel is going to do is it's going to change the way the reflections are based upon how the camera is pointed at it. What that basically means is when the camera's straight onto it, you'll have less of that specular reflected going on, but as you turn around, you'll see a little bit more of that happening like it does in nature. Now you can see this starting to change right there. And the material updates. I'm going to delete all the objects in my scene. Hit save. I went over basic keyframing. Let's do a little bit something more fun with MoGraph up here. You may need to create a Cinema4D Lite account, but it's worth it to get a little bit of extra drive inside this software, which is already free.